Pain is undoubtedly one of Naruto's most beloved and sympathetic villains. He managed to perfectly balance himself between the two categories of plain old evil villains and sympathetic humanized villains that we often see in anime and manga. It's no wonder that his arc is still considered one of the most iconic parts of the whole franchise. In some ways, he could be considered a perfect example of an anti-villain, which is explained as a character with heroic goals, personality traits, and/or virtues who is ultimately the villain by TV tropes. In this video, I'll be doing an in-depth analysis of Nagato, otherwise known as Pain. I'll go through this entire character arc with what made him into a monster, some of his personality traits, his powers, and much more. So stick around, and without any further ado, let's dive in. Before Pain was the leader of the Akatsuki, he was just a kid from Amegakure, the hidden rain village. His red hair signified that he was of the Uzumaki heritage, meaning that he had chakra reserves that were far greater than the average shinobi. Much like all other residents of the Amegakure, he found himself in the middle of a crossfire between two great shinobi nations, both figuratively and literally. It was during the Second Great Shinobi War, when in the midst of the fighting, two Konoha shinobi broke their way into Nagato's home to look for food. Nagato and his parents would try to sneak out of the house to avoid confronting the Leaf Shinobi. But while doing so, the shinobi would spot Nagato's parents and kill them, thinking they were enemy soldiers. The actions of these Leaf Shinobi would have a profound effect on Nagato's perception of the great nations like Konoha. Even though, upon seeing Nagato, the Leaf Shinobi would try to apologize to Nagato and explain what happened, it would be futile. Nagato's Renegon had seemingly awakened, and overcome with grief, he would use his newfound visual prowess to kill the two shinobi that had just killed his parents. Nagato was now an orphan, all on his own. He was also forced to leave his home and fend for himself despite having no training as a ninja. But during this time, Nagato would find two other kids that had a story similar to his. Konan and Yahiko, both of them were orphans from Amegakure, and they both had their parents killed by shinobi from the great nations. The three would stick together, look out for each other, and become extremely close friends. Yahiko in particular was inseparable from Nagato. He had a dream of becoming the most powerful ninja to have ever lived, a god. He had a dream of using his powers to end all the fighting and the war in the shinobi world. It wasn't long before Nagato and Konan would also join him to accomplish his dream. But for now, the three orphans still had no formal training as shinobi, despite Nagato's godlike visual prowess. But not long after, the three would come across the three legendary Sannin, or Konoha, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru. Yahiko initially asked them for food, but later, as the Sannin were leaving, Yahiko would ask them to stop and train them to become shinobi. Even though Tsunade and Orochimaru were against the idea, Jiraiya, who felt bad for them, decided to stay behind and take care of the kids, but not teach them ninjutsu. However, he would soon change his mind and train them once he found out that Nagato contained the same eyes as the Sage of Six Paths, which meant that Nagato could potentially be his child of prophecy that would end all fighting in the shinobi world. Nonetheless, Jiraiya formed a close bond with the kids. In doing so, he also gave them a lot of hope. One day during training, Yahiko said that he would one day become strong enough to end the misery in his village and the entire world. Jiraiya also helped the shy and reserved Nagato become more of a man. He told Nagato of the powers he possessed and how he can use them for the greater good. By the time they were teenagers, they had already become some of the most powerful ninjas in the village, mainly due to Jiraiya's training. Jiraiya had filled the eyes of Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan with endless optimism, but soon he would make his tearful departure. The three were once again on their own, but this time they were formidable shinobi, capable of fending for themselves. During this time, Yahiko would form a group called the Akatsuki, initially consisting of just him, Konan, and Nagito. But eventually getting followers from across the village, the Akatsuki had one goal: to end war. During this time, Obito would approach the Akatsuki as Madara, asking them to join his plan, but Yahiko didn't trust him and asked the others to stay away from him. But at the same time, the Akatsuki was becoming more and more popular, and it started to threaten the leader of the Megakure at the time, Hanzo. Hanzo was known as one of the most fierce shinobi to have ever lived. He had never lost a battle, not even to the three legendary Sannin. Hanzo had also formed an alliance with a secretive leaf shinobi named Danzo, and together they conspired to end the Akatsuki altogether. He set up a trap for the Akatsuki, one that they fell for, and he quickly took Konan as his hostage. Hanzo asked Nagito to do the final deed if he wanted Konan to be spared. He wanted him to kill Yahiko. In the end, Yahiko decided to take matters into his own hands, and he threw himself at Nagito's kunai, fulfilling Hanzo's demand and sparing Konan. But as he did so, he told Nagito to carry on the dream of the Akatsuki. With that, Nagito had become the leader of the Akatsuki, but his world had been turned upside down once again. Nagito would use his Rinnegan to summon the demonic statue of the Outer Path. With that, he outright massacred almost all of Hanzo's men. Although Hanzo himself managed to make an escape as the leader of the Akatsuki, Nagito would take the organization to a different direction. He believed peace could only be fueled by pain. That people in the great nations had not experienced true pain, which is why they keep fighting wars that cause even more destruction. In order to bring out the peace he was looking for, the great nations would have to know pain. He wanted to turn the Akatsuki into an international organization, so he decided to approach Obito once again, who would go on to recruit S-ranked rogue shinobi from across the world, with the goal of collecting all the tailed beasts and using them as weapons of mass destruction. He also started a short civil war in Megakure, where he would kill Hanzo and every single person that would even be remotely associated with Hanzo. In doing so, he would become a godlike figure in the village, becoming its leader and adopting the moniker of Pain. Of course, during this time, he was also being manipulated by Obito, who had actually implanted the Rinnegan into him as a child, but Nagito was unaware of the fact that he was being manipulated, and he likely didn't care. To him, all that mattered was bringing justice to the world. It's important to note the change in Nagito's personality as he became the leader of the Akatsuki. He was once someone who had almost no confidence in himself. He was shy, mostly in the background behind Yahiko, and not assertive. But as the leader, he became extremely confident in his abilities and rigid ideals, and overall, he was extremely threatening. He truly believed that there was no power on earth that could stop him. He wasn't just like a god, he was a god. He would control the fate of the entire world all by himself, and his Rinnegan gave him the ability to do so. Thanks to being an Uzumaki, Pain had enough chakra to wield the Rinnegan to its full potential. With his signature ability being the 6 paths of Pain, this allowed Pain to hide in the shadows, controlling 6 different bodies like puppets, all of which had one unique power. The main body, which originally belonged to Yahiko, was the Diva Path, which had the ability to use gravity as a weapon, with a short cooldown period between each move, along with a lot of other ninjutsu. The Diva Path was often considered the leader of the 6 paths. The other paths had their own abilities. The Preta Path was able to absorb all ninjutsu and use it as a weapon. The Animal Path was able to summon all sorts of seemingly indestructible creatures. The Asura Path was sort of like a robot devoid of all life and unable to die. The Human Path was able to suck the literal souls out of humans to either read their minds or end their life. And finally, the Nakra Path, which could summon the King of Hell, which was an invincible deity that was only visible to those who had the Rinnegan and its victims. The souls of all the victims of the Human Path were also stored inside the King of Hell. To add to that, all the 6 paths had their own Rinnegan, and they were able to see through each other's eyes. They had almost no blind spots at all and were an impossible opponent to beat. However, the 6 paths had one weakness. They all relied on each other. Pain was only invincible as long as all the 6 paths existed. They were controlled through chakra receivers embedded in their body and limbs, and Nagato, who possessed the ability of each path, did so remotely. We see this weakness emerge during Pain's assault on Konoha. As the villagers start to learn more about how Pain works, each Pain abilities, and ultimately, as Naruto defeats the paths one by one, if you don't know how Pain worked, you could not defeat him. Naruto's defeat of the 6 paths of Pain sort of made Nagato vulnerable the first time in a long time. With that, Nagato had lost his perception of himself as a god. In a lot of ways, he already sympathized with Naruto. He had the same end goal as Naruto, bringing peace to the world. However, he believed that his strength came from his pain. While Naruto believed that his strength came from his bonds and friendship, Nagato had given up on the idea of finding strength through bonds after the death of Yahiko, and in doing so, he became a lot more powerful. But after being defeated by Naruto, his outlook clearly changed. In his final act, he became a believer in Naruto, and he decided to sacrifice his life to receive all of the Konoha villagers that he killed. By believing in Naruto's way, Nagato, in a sense, went back to the path of Yahiko, the man who had created the Akatsuki in the first place. Pain is truly one of Naruto's most fleshed out and well-written characters. Even though it's hard to justify the destruction that Pain had caused in order to reach his goals, his ideals were ultimately peaceful. Pain can be compared to a lot of other characters in Naruto who had the same goals as him but had different approaches. Naruto, as I mentioned, believed in friendship, Itachi believed in loyalty, Obito believed in fixing the wrongs of the past, Madara believed in dominance and control, and Pain believed in shared empathy. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think Nagato's story could have gone in any other direction? If so, let me know your alternative timelines in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.